I didn't know my life could split cleanly into before and after because of a single notification. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It wasn't even something meant for me to see. It was just a soft ping from my boyfriend's laptop while he was in the shower. Steam still fogged the bathroom mirror. Water rushed behind the closed door. And I was standing barefoot in our bedroom, folding laundry we'd washed together the night before, humming along to a song George loved. That sound, that single harmless notification, changed everything. I told myself not to look. I knew better, but something in my chest tightened in a way I couldn't ignore. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. Shell! My fingers went cold. I stood there longer than I want to admit, staring at that heart emoji like it was blinking at me on purpose, like it knew. I wish I could say I closed the laptop. I wish I could say I respected his privacy. I wish I could say I trusted the man I had spent 6 years building a life with. But my body moved before my mind could stop it. When I opened the messages, it felt like the air was sucked out of the room. This wasn't flirting. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a single bad decision made late at night. This was months, nearly a year of lies. Hotel reservations, explicit photos, inside jokes that weren't mine, promises about a future that didn't include me. I remember sitting down on the edge of the bed because my legs gave out. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My hands shook as I scrolled, each message cutting deeper than the last. 6 years. 6 years of shared rent, shared groceries, shared plans. 6 years of brunch with his parents, late-night takeout, inside jokes, and a cat curled up between us at night. And all of it had been happening while I was right there. When George stepped out of the shower, towel around his waist, hair damp, looking at me like everything was normal, I realized something terrifying. I didn't recognize the man standing in front of me anymore. And whatever came next, there was no version of my life where it didn't hurt. Before Shell ever appeared on that screen, my life with George looked ordinary in the best way. We met in college, sophomore year, in one of those classes that weeds people out. Economics so brutal it felt like it was designed to humble every confident freshman. The first time I noticed him, he was leaning back in his chair, twirling a pen between his fingers, like he wasn't the least bit intimidated. When the professor asked a question, George answered with this quick, dry humor that made half the room laugh and the other half roll their eyes. I was in the back row, clutching my notebook like it could protect me. After class, I ended up in the same study group as him. I remember the exact moment he spoke to me directly, like my brain took a screenshot. "Hey," he said, tapping my page. "You take notes like you're preparing for court." I blinked. "Is that bad?" "No," he smiled. "It's kind of impressive. I'm George." I told him my name, and he repeated it like it mattered, like he wanted to get it right. That's the thing about George in the beginning. He made me feel chosen. I grew up in a family where achievement wasn't encouraged. It was expected. My older sister was already on the track to becoming a lawyer, sharp and unstoppable. My younger brother was the kind of kid teachers bragged about, the future doctor everyone could already see. And then there was me, creative, quiet, always a half step behind, always feeling like I needed to prove I deserved space at the table. George didn't make me prove anything. When I told him I wanted to pursue graphic design, even though my parents kept pushing me towards something safer, he didn't laugh. He didn't question it. He just said, "Then do it. You're good. I can tell." I didn't even know him that well yet. And I remember standing there with my coffee, feeling my throat tighten because no one had ever said it that simply to me. He was attentive in ways that felt almost cinematic. Little notes tucked in my textbooks during exam week, random snacks left by my dorm door. That one awful night I got food poisoning from a sketchy campus food truck. George stayed up with me, half asleep on the floor, handing me water and whispering, "You're okay. I've got you." I fell hard. After graduation, we both got entry-level jobs in the same city. It felt like fate giving us permission to start a real life. We moved into a cozy apartment in a busy neighborhood. The landlord was quirky, always trying to introduce us to her grandchildren like she didn't see the obvious. One afternoon, she winked and said, "You two are cute, but if it doesn't work out, I have options." George laughed. I laughed too. Back then, laughter came easily. We adopted Whiskers from a shelter, an orange tabby with a crooked tail and an attitude like he owned the place. The first night we brought him home, Whiskers crawled directly into George's lap like he'd made a decision. George looked at me, proud like he'd won something. "He knows I'm the favorite." "Absolutely not," I said, scooping Whiskers up. He just senses you're weak. George's eyes crinkled. I'm not weak. You baby talk him, I accused. I do not. George lowered his voice immediately. Who's a handsome little guy? Who's my sweet boy? I remember thinking, this is home. The first few years were normal fights. Dishes, money, whose turn it was to buy groceries. Nothing that felt like a warning sign. Then George's job changed. He got an offer from a tech startup. Better salary, bigger pressure. He came home buzzing for weeks, talking fast, eyes bright. They're building something huge, he said one night, pacing our living room like he couldn't contain himself. This could change everything for us. For us, I repeated, smiling. I'm proud of you. At first I was, but slowly the texture of our life shifted. George started coming home later. He started saying things like, it's confidential, when I asked normal questions. He kept his phone angled away from me. If I walked into a room, his screen would go dark too quickly, like a reflex. And every time my gut tried to speak, he'd beat it back down with the same line, calm, practiced, almost gentle. Babe, why can't you just trust me? I wanted to. God, I wanted to. Because trusting him felt easier than imagining the alternative. And because a part of me, some old scar from high school, when my first serious boyfriend cheated on me with my best friend, was terrified of being that girl again. The girl who didn't see it until it was too late. So I swallowed the discomfort. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself George loved me. I told myself we were building a future. And all the while, something else was quietly building underneath us. Something I didn't have a name for yet. Not until the night the laptop pinged. Not until Shell. Looking back now, the signs weren't invisible. They were just inconvenient. At the time, I treated them like background noise. Things I could explain away if I tried hard enough. A late meeting, a missed call, a tone that felt slightly off but not wrong enough to confront. George's schedule became unpredictable, not busy, unreachable. There were nights he'd text, running late, don't wait up, and I'd sit on the couch with whiskers curled against my thigh, the TV playing something I wasn't really watching, glancing at the clock every few minutes like it might apologize. When he finally came home, he smelled like alcohol, sometimes like perfume that wasn't mine. Work drinks, he'd say casually, kicking off his shoes. You know how it is. I did know how it was, or at least I knew how I wanted it to be. I started noticing how defensive he became over small things. If I asked who he was texting, his jaw tightened just slightly. Why does it matter, he'd say, not angry, just cool. Because we're partners, I wanted to say. Because we tell each other things. Because this is what trust looks like. Instead, I said, it doesn't, I was just curious. He'd relax immediately, kiss my forehead. The moment would pass. Those moments piled up. There were nights I'd hear his phone buzz while he was in the shower. I'd look at it instinctively, then look away, like it burned. I told myself I was proud of how mature I was being. But deep down, I felt like I was shrinking to fit the version of myself that made things easier for him. I tried to reconnect in small ways, suggested date nights, weekend trips, even just cooking together like we used to. One Friday, I laid everything out on the counter, pasta, garlic, fresh herbs. George walked in late, eyes on his phone. I made your favorite, I said, trying to sound light. He glanced up. Oh, I already ate. Something in my chest dropped. At work? Yeah, it was spontaneous. He shrugged. Sorry. I stood there, garlic still in my hand, feeling ridiculous for trying. When I told him I felt distant from him, he didn't deny it, but he reframed it. You're just stressed, he said gently. You've been working late too. We're both busy. That's adulthood. I wanted to believe that. But then came the nights he'd go out with coworkers, the team, and come home wired, talking fast, energized in a way I hadn't seen in months. Once I asked casually, who's on your team again? He hesitated. Just people from different departments, he said. It's complicated. There was that word again. Complicated. I started noticing how he stopped sharing future plans with me. No more when we, or after we. Just I might, or I'm thinking about. Even Whiskers noticed the change. He stopped sleeping on George's side of the bed. I told myself I was overanalyzing. Because the truth was scarier. I had been here before, years ago, with my first serious boyfriend. I remembered the sinking feeling, the constant self-doubt. The way betrayal doesn't announce itself, it leaks into your life slowly. George knew that story. He knew how hard it was for me to trust again, which made it worse when he used it against me. One night, after I asked why he was always on his phone lately, he sighed heavily. I thought you trusted me, he said quietly. I do, I replied immediately. Then why does this feel like an interrogation? I apologized. That's what hurts the most when I replay it now. I was always the one apologizing. For asking questions, for feeling uneasy, for noticing changes. The final seed planted itself weeks before everything blew up. We were lying in bed, lights off, whiskers between us. George was scrolling through his phone, the blue light sharp in the dark. "Can you put that away?" I asked softly. "Just for a bit?" He didn't look at me. "I need to answer this." "Right now?" "Yes." Something snapped, not loudly, quietly. "I miss you," I said, "even when you're here." He froze. For a moment, I thought he might finally say something real. Instead, he exhaled and said, "You're imagining distance that isn't there." That was the moment I stopped trusting my own instincts. And that's the most dangerous place a woman can be. Because when you silence your intuition long enough, the truth doesn't creep in. It crashes. And it's never gentle. The night everything finally shattered didn't feel dramatic at first. It felt ordinary. George was in the shower, humming off key like he always did, steam creeping under the bathroom door. I was in the bedroom folding laundry, the familiar rhythm calming in a way that almost felt like denial. Whiskers sprawled across the warm clothes, completely unbothered by the quiet tension that had become our normal. Then came the sound. A soft ping. Not loud, not urgent, just enough. George's laptop was open on the bed, the screen angled slightly toward me. I told myself I wouldn't look. I had made that promise to myself 100 times before. But my body moved anyway. The message preview lit up. "Shell, I miss you already." My vision narrowed. My heartbeat roared in my ears so loudly I couldn't hear the shower anymore. Shell. Not a nickname I recognized, not a coworker he'd mentioned. And that heart, bright, intentional, felt like it was mocking me. I stared at the screen longer than was reasonable, hoping, absurdly, that the message would change, that context would appear, that it would make sense. It didn't. My hands were shaking as I clicked. What I found wasn't flirtation. It was a life, a second life unfolding parallel to mine. There were months of messages, inside jokes, pet names, photos taken in places George had told me he was working late, hotel confirmations, explicit pictures that made my stomach turn, not just because of the intimacy, but because of the familiarity, the way he spoke, the phrases he used. Phrases he used with me. "I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years. She doesn't understand me the way you do." She. I scrolled until my fingers went numb. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a year-long relationship, carefully hidden, meticulously maintained. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the room tilting slightly, like I was underwater. My breath came in shallow gasps, each one scraping my throat raw. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, holding the weight of it, while the man I loved rinsed shampoo out of his hair a few feet away. When the bathroom door opened, George stepped out wrapped in a towel, hair damp, relaxed. He smiled when he saw me. "Hey," he said casually, "what's wrong?" I held up the laptop. His smile vanished. For a split second, just a heartbeat, his face went blank. Not confused, not innocent. Caught. "Why are you on my computer?" he snapped, anger flashing faster than guilt. That hurt more than I expected. "I saw the message," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was too calm, too hollow. "Who is Shell?" He scoffed, running a hand through his wet hair. "You invaded my privacy. That's not okay." I stared at him. "You've been cheating on me," I said, "for almost a year." "That's not—" He stopped when he saw the screen still open. The messages visible, the photos undeniable. His shoulders sagged. Then he broke. He dropped onto the bed, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said, voice cracking. "It didn't mean anything." I laughed. A short, broken sound that surprised even me. "Nothing?" I whispered. "You built a whole relationship behind my back." He looked up, eyes red, desperation replacing anger. "I was lonely," he said quickly. "Work was stressful. You were always busy. She was just there. It didn't mean I love her." I stood up. "You told her you wanted a future with her." "That was just talk." "You planned trips." I was confused. "You let me believe I was paranoid." "I never meant to hurt you." That one landed like a slap. "You chose to," I said quietly. He reached for me. I stepped back. "I love you," he said. "Please, we can fix this. I'll cut her off. I'll do anything." I couldn't look at him anymore. I grabbed a bag from the closet, hands moving on autopilot. Clothes, toothbrush, my charger. Whiskers watched from the bed, tail flicking, confused. "Where are you going?" George asked, panic rising. "Somewhere I can breathe." "Don't do this," he pleaded. "You're throwing everything away." I turned to him then. No, I said, you already did. When I walked out, I didn't slam the door. I closed it carefully. Because even in that moment, part of me was still trying not to make things harder. That was the last kindness I gave him. My sister's apartment smelled like lavender cleaner and leftover pasta. It was quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar. No humming laptop, no buzzing phone on the coffee table, no whiskers padding across the floor. Just me, sitting on the edge of the guest bed, staring at the wall like it might explain what had just happened. I didn't cry that first night. I lay there fully dressed, phone face down on the nightstand, heart beating in uneven bursts, replaying the last year of my life frame by frame like I was trying to spot the exact second everything went wrong. Had I been boring, too trusting, too busy, not enough? These questions crept in quietly, poisonous and persistent. My sister knocked once before coming in, her expression careful. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't push. She just handed me a glass of water and said, "You're safe here." That broke me. The tears came then, silent at first, then deep and shaking, like my body had been holding them hostage until I was somewhere I could fall apart without being judged. George didn't give me space. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. "Please talk to me. I made a mistake. I love you. You're overreacting. Answer me." The swing between apology and accusation made my stomach churn. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, unsure what response would hurt least. I didn't reply. I spent the day in a fog, answering emails at work with polite professionalism while my mind was somewhere else entirely. Every design draft blurred together. Every decision felt impossible. That night, I finally answered one of his calls. "I'm not okay," I said the moment I heard his voice. "I know," George replied quickly. "I know I messed up, but you leaving like that, it scared me." That word, scared, almost made me laugh. "You lied to me for a year," I said. "You let me doubt my own instincts. Do you know what that does to someone?" "I was afraid you'd leave," he admitted. "I didn't want to lose you." "So you cheated?" Silence. "I never stopped loving you," he said softly. That was the most confusing part of all. Because I believed him. Or at least I believed that he believed it. And that scared me even more. Over the next few days, I oscillated between clarity and doubt. 1 hour, I'd feel strong, certain that I'd done the right thing. The next, I'd miss him so intensely it felt physical. 6 years doesn't disappear overnight. There were practical things I couldn't ignore. The lease, the joint bank account, the credit card, whiskers. I pictured our apartment without me, George on the couch, the bed cold on my side, the cat looking for me and not understanding why I wasn't there. The thought made my chest ache. When George suggested meeting to talk things through, part of me wanted to say yes immediately. Another part, the quieter, braver part, knew I needed space before I let his voice rewrite reality again. So I told him to move out temporarily. "I need to think," I said, "without you here." He didn't take it well. "You're punishing me," he said bitterly. I said I was sorry. "I'm protecting myself." He left 2 days later. The apartment felt lighter afterward. Still painful, but breathable. That's when I started asking the harder questions. Not about him, about me. Why had I ignored so many red flags? Why had I accepted gaslighting as reassurance? Why had I apologized for wanting honesty? I kept coming back to one thought. I had been so afraid of losing the relationship that I lost myself instead. That realization hurt almost as much as the betrayal. A week later, something unexpected happened. I saw Shell. It was a random Tuesday morning. I stopped at my usual coffee shop before work, still half asleep, clutching my cup like a lifeline. She was standing in line ahead of me. I recognized her instantly. Not from photos, though I'd seen enough, but from the way my body reacted. The sudden tightness, the heat in my face. She turned, our eyes met. Recognition flickered across her face, too. We stood there for a moment, suspended in something neither of us had prepared for. She spoke first. "You're his girlfriend, aren't you?" The way she said it, tentative, unsure, made my stomach drop. "Yes," I said slowly, "I am." Her face drained of color. That was the moment everything shifted. Because for the first time, I realized something terrifying and validating at the same time. I might not be the only one who had been lied to. And the truth, whatever it was bigger than George had admitted. Shell didn't look like the villain I had imagined. She looked stunned. We stood there in that coffee shop, the hiss of the espresso machine filling the space between us, people shuffling forward in line as if the world hadn't just tilted on its axis for both of us. She started, then stopped. I didn't know. I folded my arms, more to steady myself than to appear guarded. "Didn't know about me?" She shook her head immediately. "He told me he was single, that you'd broken up a long time ago." The barista called her name. Shell didn't move. I wouldn't have done this, she said quickly, like she needed me to understand. I swear, I've been cheated on before. I'm not that person. Something inside me cracked, not with rage, but with a strange, aching clarity. We took our coffees to a small table in the corner. I didn't know why I sat down with her. Maybe I needed to hear the truth from someone who didn't benefit from lying to me. Or maybe I needed to know I wasn't crazy. Shell pulled out her phone and turned it toward me. Message after message. George telling her he hated feeling trapped. George saying he stayed with me out of convenience. George promising that once things settled, he'd leave. He talked about a future with me, she said quietly. Kids, traveling, a place together. My chest tightened. He talked about marriage with me, I replied. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of his deception hanging thick between us. It's been almost a year, she said finally. Longer than he admitted, I guess. I nodded. He told me it was just a mistake. Shell let out a bitter laugh. That's impressive. A year is a long mistake. When I left the coffee shop, my hands were shaking, but my mind was clear in a way it hadn't been since the night I walked out. There was no misunderstanding, no gray area, no version of events where this could be fixed with apologies. I texted George that afternoon. We need to talk about logistics, not reconciliation. He showed up at the apartment that night without warning, drunk. I knew the moment I opened the door, the glassy eyes, the unsteady stance, the smell of alcohol clinging to him like a second skin. Why did you talk to her? He slurred, anger bubbling just beneath the surface. I stepped back instinctively. You don't get to ask me that. You ruined everything, he snapped. You couldn't just let it go. Something in him shifted then, his remorse turning sharp and unpredictable. I gave you everything, he shouted, and you still went digging. That's not how this works, I said, my voice trembling but firm. You lied to both of us. He laughed, harsh and unrecognizable. You think she's innocent? She knew something was off. That doesn't make what you did okay. He knocked over a chair, then another. That was the moment fear cut through the sadness. I called the police. I didn't hesitate. I didn't warn him. I just did it. When they escorted him out, he was crying, yelling my name, promising he'd fix it if I just let him stay. I stood in the doorway, numb. The next day, his mother called me. She was sobbing. He showed up at my house last night, she said. He's not okay. He said he can't live without you. Guilt tried to claw its way back in. I pushed it away. I'm not responsible for his mental health, I said carefully. Please get him help. I gave her the crisis hotline number and blocked her afterward, hands shaking. The fallout spread quickly. Friends chose sides. Some asked invasive questions. Others went silent. At work, I stayed late just to avoid going home to an apartment that felt haunted by everything I thought it was supposed to be. I started therapy. In those sessions, I learned words for what I'd experienced. Gaslighting, emotional manipulation, trauma bonding. Names didn't erase the pain, but they gave it shape. Boundaries. The practical disentangling was brutal. Closing the joint bank account. Canceling the credit card. Hours on hold. Explaining my life to strangers with customer service scripts. The landlord was surprisingly kind. She let me take over the lease alone. You deserve peace, she said, squeezing my arm gently. Keeping whiskers felt like the only small mercy in all of it. Then, unexpectedly, Shell reached out again. She wasn't trying to be my friend. She wasn't looking for absolution. She just wanted closure. We met a few more times. Support group meetings, therapy referrals, 2 women comparing notes after surviving the same storm. There was nothing romantic there, nothing inappropriate. Just truth. And truth, I learned, has a way of burning everything else away. By the time George moved out of state for a new job, I felt lighter. Not healed, but no longer drowning. Still, the consequences kept rippling outward. Mutual friends drifted. Invitations stopped coming. The gym felt awkward. Brunch with his parents vanished from my calendar like it had never existed. Every part of my life that had been intertwined with his had to be examined, untangled, and sometimes cut loose. It was exhausting. And then, one night, alone in my half-empty apartment, surrounded by boxes and memories, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the collapse of an identity I had built around someone who never truly stood beside me. And standing in that rubble, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about saving him. I was thinking about saving myself. There's a particular kind of silence that only comes after chaos. Not peace, just the absence of noise, heavy and unsettling. That was my apartment at night. The boxes were stacked against the wall, half unpacked because I couldn't bring myself to decide where anything belonged anymore. The couch felt too big with only one body on it. The TV stayed off because background noise only made the emptiness louder. Whiskers slept curled against my ribs, his steady breathing the only proof that something in this space still depended on me. And in those hours, when the world finally stopped demanding explanations, I felt everything collapse inward. The shock had worn off. The anger had burned itself down. What remained was grief. Not just for George. For the future I had rehearsed in my head 1,000 times. Marriage, kids, inside jokes that were supposed to last decades. I caught myself reaching for my phone out of habit to tell him something small and meaningless, a dumb thought, a stray observation. Then I'd remember there was no him to tell anymore. That realization hit me over and over, like a bruise you keep pressing just to see if it still hurts. It did. Some nights I replayed our entire relationship backward, like I could reverse engineer the moment I should have left. Was it when he stopped asking about my day? When he made me feel needy for wanting reassurance? When I apologized for noticing changes that were very real? Other nights my thoughts turned darker. Maybe I was too much, too sensitive, too boring. George's words echoed in my head, even though I knew they were weapons, not truths. She understands me in ways you don't. I wondered what that meant. I wondered what part of me had been insufficient. Therapy helped, but healing isn't linear. Some sessions left me empowered. Others cracked me open so deeply I cried in my car afterward, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing in my life. One evening, I found an old ticket stub tucked inside a drawer. A concert we went to early in our relationship. I could still remember the smell of sweat and beer, the way George had leaned in to shout lyrics into my ear, laughing when he got them wrong. I sank onto the floor with the stub in my hand and cried like someone had died. Because someone had. The version of him I loved, the one I thought was real, never existed the way I believed. That's a specific kind of morning. Work suffered. I stayed late not because I was productive, but because going home felt unbearable. My designs became safe, uninspired. My boss pulled me aside gently one afternoon. "Do you need time off?" she asked. "You don't seem like yourself." I almost laughed. I didn't know who myself was anymore. I started avoiding social events. Weddings, baby showers, engagement parties. They all felt like salt in an open wound. Every milestone someone else hit felt like confirmation that I'd failed at mine. At night, fear crept in. I was 29. Single, starting over. That number echoed louder than I wanted it to. I worried I'd wasted my best years on someone who didn't value me, that I'd trusted too deeply and paid for it, that next time I'd be harder, colder, closed off. I worried that part of me would never fully open again. One night, sitting on the bathroom floor, back against the tub, I admitted something out loud for the first time. I don't know how to be okay without him. The words felt pathetic as soon as they left my mouth, but they were honest. And honesty, even when it's ugly, is where change starts. The lowest moment came quietly. No breakdown, no dramatic scene. Just a morning where I couldn't get out of bed. The weight of it all pressed down so hard my body refused to move. I called in sick, stared at the ceiling. Let the day slip by unused. That night, as whiskers headbutted my chin, demanding attention, something small but stubborn stirred inside me. I realized something important. If I didn't choose myself now, no one else would. I had spent years adjusting, accommodating, softening myself so someone else could stay comfortable, and it had cost me everything. Lying there in the dark, with nothing left to distract me, I made a quiet promise. I wouldn't let this betrayal define the rest of my life, even if I didn't know what healing looked like yet, even if all I could do was survive one day at a time. This was the bottom, and the only direction left was up. The turning point didn't arrive like a revelation. There was no sudden confidence, no triumphant music, no moment where everything snapped into place. It came quietly, through repetition, through therapy sessions where I learned to say no without apologizing, through mornings where I forced myself out of bed even when my chest felt heavy, through small choices that added up to something sturdier than hope. The first real shift happened during a session with my therapist. I was describing George, again, analyzing his behavior, his childhood, his stress, his depression. I was still trying to make sense of him like it was my responsibility. She let me finish. Then she asked gently, "When was the last time you asked what you needed?" The question landed harder than anything George had ever said to me. I opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out. I didn't know. For 6 years, my needs had been framed as negotiable, adjustable, something to compromise if it made things smoother. I realized I had confused endurance with love. That night, I went home and did something symbolic, but necessary. I deleted our shared photo album from my phone, not because I hated the memories, not because they weren't real, but because I didn't need them anchoring me to a past that no longer existed. I cried while I did it. Then I slept better than I had in weeks. I started reclaiming pieces of myself slowly. I signed up for a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to try, but never prioritized. My first bowl collapsed in on itself, lopsided and useless. I laughed. It felt good to fail at something that didn't hurt. I reconnected with Mia, my best friend from high school. We drifted apart quietly while I was building a life with George. She showed up one night with ice cream and terrible movies and stayed until 2 a.m. "You seem lighter," she said, studying me. "I'm trying," I replied, and for once it wasn't a lie. Work became a place of focus again, instead of avoidance. I threw myself into a redesign project that demanded creativity and confidence. My boss noticed. "You're sharp," she told me one afternoon. "I don't know what you've been through, but whatever it is, you're handling it." That validation mattered more than I expected. Then came the conversation that sealed everything. George showed up unannounced one evening. Sober this time, calmer. He stood in the doorway like someone waiting for permission to exist. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said. "For real this time. I'm getting help. I'm leaving the state." I looked at him and felt nothing dramatic. No rage, no longing, just clarity. "I hope you get better," I said, "but we're done." He searched my face, probably expecting hesitation. He didn't find it. That was when I understood. Power doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like peace. The final piece came from an unexpected place, Shell. We met one last time for coffee. Not for closure, just acknowledgement. "I'm moving on," she told me. "I needed you to know that what he did wasn't because of you." "I know," I said, and this time I meant it. We didn't hug. We didn't promise to stay in touch. We just walked away, two women choosing not to carry someone else's damage anymore. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, whiskers purring against my leg, and took stock of my life. It wasn't what I had planned, but it was mine. I wasn't waiting for George to change. I wasn't bracing for his moods. I wasn't shrinking to be loved. I had survived betrayal without becoming bitter. I had walked away without needing revenge. And in doing so, I reclaimed something far more valuable than a relationship: myself. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They never do. They spread slowly, like cracks traveling through glass long after the impact. After George left the state, the noise around him faded, but the truth kept moving, quietly undoing the version of himself he'd tried so hard to curate. Mutual friends started reaching out. Not dramatically, not apologetically, just cautiously. "I didn't know," one of them said over the phone. "He told us you were on a break." Another admitted, "He made it sound mutual." I didn't correct them. I didn't need to. The truth has a way of finding its own voice. I heard through Mia that George's new job didn't last long. Something about performance issues, missed deadlines, a pattern of emotional instability that followed him wherever he went. I felt no satisfaction in that. Just distance. His parents stopped calling. His mother sent one final message, short, restrained, apologizing for how everything unfolded. I replied politely and closed that chapter. What surprised me most was how much of my world quietly reorganized itself around my absence from his life. Some friends drifted away, people who preferred the comfort of neutrality to the discomfort of truth. Others stepped closer. The ones who stayed didn't ask invasive questions. They didn't minimize what happened. They simply showed up. I kept whiskers. That decision felt symbolic. He followed me from room to room like he always had, unbothered by the upheaval. He slept on my side of the bed, as if it had always been his. Financially, things were tighter. I picked up freelance work on weekends, adjusted my budget, learned to navigate independence in ways I hadn't needed to before. It was hard, but it was honest. For the first time in years, every choice I made was mine alone. I ran into one of George's friends at the grocery store a few months later. The conversation was polite, but awkward. "He's struggling," they said carefully. I nodded. I hope he figures it out. And I meant it. But I didn't offer myself as a bridge back to stability. I had learned that lesson the hard way. The real fallout wasn't dramatic. There was no public apology, no confession, no grand reckoning, just quiet consequences. A life that didn't hold together once the lies were removed. And me, standing on the other side of it, no longer feeling responsible for how that story ended. One afternoon, as I was packing away winter clothes, I found the ring George had once casually mentioned, joking about someday. I held it for a moment. Then I placed it in a donation box, not out of spite, out of release, because the version of my life that included him was over, and I didn't need proof of what almost was. I heard later that George tried to explain himself to Shell again, that he reached out to her when things fell apart. She didn't respond. That made me smile, not because I wanted him punished, but because I recognized the boundary, the same one I had drawn. The universe didn't need my help correcting anything. It handled it on its own. 6 months ago, I thought my life had ended. Now I understand it simply changed direction. I live in a small studio apartment with warm light in the mornings and just enough space for me and Whiskers to stretch out without tripping over each other. It's not the home I imagined sharing with someone else, but it's peaceful in a way I didn't know I was missing. I've learned how to sit with myself again, not constantly distracted, not bracing for conflict, not waiting for someone else's mood to determine my worth. There are still moments when grief sneaks up on me, anniversaries that pass quietly, songs I skip because they belong to another version of me. But those moments don't control me anymore. I've stopped asking why he cheated. That question kept me trapped, circling the same pain over and over. Instead, I ask myself something different now. What did I learn? I learned that love without respect is erosion. I learned that trust should never require silence. I learned that staying because of history can cost you your future. Most importantly, I learned that betrayal doesn't mean I failed. It means I outgrew a situation that could never give me what I deserved. I don't regret loving George. I regret ignoring myself. That distinction matters. I'm dating again, slowly, carefully, with curiosity instead of desperation. I don't rush intimacy. I don't explain my boundaries away. And the right people don't ask me to. My work is thriving. I'm taking a solo trip next year, something I always wanted to do, but never felt brave enough to plan. I fill my weekends with things that make me feel present instead of preoccupied. I'm not over it in the fairy tale sense, but I'm whole. If there's one thing I hope anyone watching this takes away, it's this. You don't need closure from the person who broke you. You become whole the moment you stop asking them to explain. Sometimes survival is the victory. Sometimes walking away quietly is the strongest thing you'll ever do. And sometimes the life you rebuild, the one rooted in truth and self-respect, ends up being better than the one you lost.